My name is Emerson Cole, and 3 years ago I bought a rundown substation lot at a county auction for $11,000 because nobody else in the room actually understood what they were looking at. Everyone else saw a fenced patch of weeds with a rusted transformer humming behind chain link. I saw the single point of interconnection that fed power to the entire Brackenfield Estates subdivision, a private microgrid arrangement the original 1987 developer had set up because running county lines out to that stretch of hills would have cost triple what the builder wanted to spend. So instead, he built his own substation, wired the whole neighborhood into it, and quietly sold off the utility rights to a shell company decades before anyone living there today ever signed a mortgage. That shell company folded in 2003. The asset sat dormant, technically owned by nobody, until the county finally auctioned off the lien and I picked it up, not because I wanted to become a power company, but because I do infrastructure law consulting and recognized exactly what kind of sleeping giant that scrap of land really was. I spent almost a year quietly formalizing it, registering as a legitimate small private utility provider, getting licensed through the State Public Utilities Commission, and folding every single household in Brackenfield into service contracts that, frankly, most of them never bothered reading, since their power just kept working and their bills stayed roughly the same as before. Nobody asked who owned the wire. Nobody asked who owned the meter. And that very ignorance is exactly what let Peggy Pinkston believe, with the full confidence of a woman who has never once in her life been told no, that the electricity flowing into her driveway was some kind of ambient public utility, hers by birthright, hers to distribute to anyone she pleased. Peggy ran the Brackenfield Estates HOA the way some people run cults, through fear, selective enforcement, and a truly staggering ego. She fined a widow $400 over a garden gnome she decided violated aesthetic harmony. She had a disabled veteran's wheelchair ramp reported to code enforcement because it wasn't architecturally consistent. So when she bought herself a Tesla Model X to round out her personal brand of suburban royalty and discovered her home charger wasn't fast enough for her taste, she did exactly what she always does. She decided the rules simply didn't apply to her and began plugging her car into the shared 240V maintenance outlet at the community clubhouse. The one explicitly reserved, in writing, for HOA landscaping equipment and reserved under my utility service agreement for commercial load only, billed at commercial rates, capped at a limited daily draw, specifically because that line runs current directly off my substation's secondary transformer. The one piece of equipment in that entire grid that cannot handle sustained residential vehicle level draw without tripping load balancing across 3 surrounding streets. I know this because I watched it unfold in real time on my monitoring dashboard. Watched voltage sag hit 4 different houses at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Watched an elderly man's oxygen concentrator on Birchwood Lane flicker completely off for 11 long seconds before backup power finally kicked in. And when I traced the draw spike back to its source, it was Peggy, sitting in her car in a lawn chair, scrolling her phone, charging for free on infrastructure she did not own, did not maintain, and had never once asked permission to use. I went to her directly first, because I try to be a reasonable person before I become anything else. I explained, calmly, standing right there in the clubhouse parking lot, that the outlet she was using was metered separately, that it belonged to a private utility entity, that her draw was destabilizing service to her neighbors, and that if she wanted a dedicated high-speed charger, I would happily quote her a commercial hookup like anyone else. She looked at me as though I had just confessed to a crime. She informed me, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, that electricity is a public good, that nobody owns the wires in America, and that I was clearly running some kind of scam preying on hard-working homeowners. When I unplugged her charging cable to protect the 4 other homes she was destabilizing, she screamed that I had assaulted her property, and before I had even reached my car, she was already on the phone with the sheriff's department, claiming a man was vandalizing HOA equipment and threatening residents. 2 deputies arrived within 9 minutes, because in a county this size, that's fast. And I want you to imagine standing there in a dark parking lot at 10 at night, while a woman points at you and insists you're a criminal, while you're holding a folder of state utility licensing documents in your other hand, wondering if tonight is the night decades of quietly building something legitimate gets erased completely by someone else's tantrum. And honestly, this is exactly the part of the story where I need you watching all the way through. Because what happens over the next 6 weeks is the part nobody who's only halfway paying attention ever gets to see. So if you're still here, hit that subscribe button now, because this is where it turns from a parking lot argument into a full legal collapse. The responding deputies, to their credit, actually asked to see documentation before doing anything, and I handed over my PUC registration, the recorded easement, and metering logs showing the exact voltage sag timestamps matched to her vehicle's charging sessions. One deputy actually laughed, not unkindly, and told Peggy this looked like a civil utility dispute, not a criminal matter, and that she needed to take it up with the utility provider, meaning me, in writing. She was furious, but fury wasn't the mistake. The real mistake was what she did next, because rather than stopping quietly, Peggy decided the problem was that I existed as a private entity with authority over her. So she spent the next month rallying the HOA board to challenge my utility license itself, filing a formal complaint with the State Public Utilities Commission alleging I was operating an illegal predatory monopoly, dragging 4 board members into signing affidavits they clearly hadn't read closely, all in an effort to get my substation license revoked so the neighborhood could seize the infrastructure under some vague theory of community ownership. What Peggy did not know, what none of them bothered to check before filing state paperwork with their names attached, was that a formal PUC complaint triggers a mandatory infrastructure audit. And that audit doesn't just examine me. It examines every household connected to that grid, every service agreement, every meter, every unauthorized draw over the past 3 years. Because state regulators don't investigate half a system, they investigate the whole thing. The audit took 5 weeks, and it found exactly what I already knew it would find: that Peggy Pinkston had been running an unmetered secondary line from the clubhouse maintenance outlet straight to her own garage for private residential use for over a year. Not just for her Tesla, but bypassing her own home meter entirely for a portion of her household draw. A textbook case of utility theft under state code, compounded by the fact that she had signed, as HOA president, the very commercial use service agreement she was violating. Meaning she had actual knowledge of the terms she broke, which under state law elevates unmetered theft of utility service from a misdemeanor into a felony, with restitution calculated on estimated draw across the full theft period. The state didn't just fine her, they referred it straight to the county prosecutor, who filed felony theft of utility services. And simultaneously, the PUC audit cleared my license entirely and formally confirmed my exclusive right to that substation and every connected line. Meaning the HOA board's complaint had accidentally handed regulators a signed, notarized paper trail proving their own president's crime, while cementing my legal monopoly over their electricity for the next 20 years under the original 1987 franchise terms, which I now legally control outright. Peggy stood in criminal court 8 months later facing felony charges, a restitution order exceeding $60,000 for stolen service, and a civil suit from 4 separate neighbors whose medical equipment and home systems had been damaged by the voltage instability her theft caused, one of which included the family of the man whose oxygen concentrator failed. She lost her HOA presidency by unanimous board vote the week the audit results became public. She lost her Tesla to a lien when she couldn't cover both the restitution and her existing loan. And every single resident of Brackenfield Estates, the same people who once trusted her word over a stranger's licensing paperwork, now receives a monthly bill from a company they finally understand is legally, permanently, unshakably mine, funded in no small part by the theft case she herself triggered. Because sometimes the most devastating collapse a person can suffer is watching their own arrogance become the very evidence that convicts them. And if this story got your blood boiling in the best way, drop a comment telling me exactly which part made you gasp. Because there's a lot more where this came from, and I promise you the next one goes even deeper.